The sun came up over London on a special day. It was Coronation Day. People lined the streets very early. Some had been there all night. They wanted to see the royal family. Flags waved in the wind. The air felt full of joy. Inside Buckingham Palace, things were busy. Workers rushed around. They checked everything one last time. This day had to be perfect. The palace shined and sparkled. Fresh flowers sat in tall vases. Red carpets were laid out. King Charles stood in his room. He looked at himself in a big mirror. His uniform was perfect. Every medal was in the right place. His hands shook a little. He had waited many years for this day. Now it was here. He took a deep breath. Queen Camilla came into the room. She wore a beautiful white dress. Small jewels made it shine in the light. She smiled at Charles. She knew he was nervous. She took his hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "It is time," said a worker at the door. Outside, the golden coach waited. 8 white horses stood ready. They had red covers on their backs. Men in bright red coats held the horses. The coach shined in the sun. It looked like it was made of real gold. The palace doors opened wide. People outside cheered loudly. King Charles and Queen Camilla walked out. They stood tall. They waved to the people. Cameras flashed everywhere. The king and queen got into the coach. The inside had soft red seats. Gold trim was on every part. The door closed with a click. The horses began to move. The coach rolled forward slowly. Behind them, more coaches came out. Prince William and Princess Catherine sat in one. Their 3 children were with them. The children looked out the windows with big eyes. This was a day they would always remember. Prince Harry sat in another coach. He looked serious. The coaches moved in a line down the street. People waved flags and took pictures. Some people cried happy tears. This was history happening right before their eyes. The coaches moved slowly through London. Police officers rode in front on motorcycles. Men on horses rode next to the coaches. They wore tall black hats made of bear fur. Their red coats stood out in the crowd. The sound of horses' hooves filled the air. The royal family was on its way to Westminster Abbey. The coaches moved through the streets of London. People stood 10 deep on both sides. They pushed to get a better look. Children sat on their parents' shoulders. Old people stood on tiptoes. Everyone wanted to see the king. Inside the royal coach, King Charles looked out at his people. This was his first time seeing them as their king. He felt the weight of his new job. So many people would look to him now. He would need to be strong and wise. Queen Camilla touched his arm. "You look worried," she said in a soft voice. "I am thinking of all the kings and queens before me," he replied. "I hope I can be as good as they were." The coach passed many famous London places. It went by Big Ben, the giant clock tower. It passed the Houses of Parliament where laws are made. People in the buildings waved from windows. The coach went by Trafalgar Square where 4 big lion statues watched. In the coach behind, Prince William talked to his children. "This is the same route many kings and queens have taken," he told them. "Your grandmother took this same trip when she became queen." Prince George, who would be king someday, listened closely. Princess Charlotte looked at all the people. Prince Louis waved his small hand at everyone. The people waved back and smiled. Prince Harry thought about his mother. Princess Diana had ridden these streets many times. He wished she could be here today. He knew she would be proud of her sons. The coaches turned onto a wide street. At the end stood Westminster Abbey. It was a huge old church. Its tall towers reached to the sky. It had seen many kings and queens come and go. Today it waited for a new one. Outside the abbey, important people from all over the world waited. Presidents and prime ministers stood in groups. Kings and queens from other countries were there too. They wore their best clothes and medals. Inside the abbey, workers made last checks. Flowers lined the long aisle. Candles burned bright. The old stone walls had seen this ceremony many times. They had watched kings and queens come and go for almost 1,000 years. The choir boys and girls took their places. They wore white robes. They had practiced their songs for months. The organ player sat ready. His fingers hovered over the keys. Soon he would fill the abbey with music. The golden coach stopped outside the abbey. The horses stood still. People held their breath. The door of the coach opened slowly. A footman in a red coat stood ready. He put down steps for the king and queen. The time had come. King Charles stepped out of the golden coach. He stood tall in his uniform. The sun made his medals shine. Queen Camilla stepped out after him. Her white dress seemed to glow. She held a small bunch of flowers. The crowd cheered loudly. Some people cried. This was a moment they would tell their grandchildren about. King Charles waved to the people. His face looked serious, but his eyes were kind. Prince William and his family stepped out of their coach. The three royal children stood close to their parents. They had practiced how to act today. Prince George stood extra tall. He knew he would be king someday. Prince Harry joined the family. They all stood together for a moment. They were about to walk into history. The Archbishop of Canterbury waited at the abbey door. He wore special robes for the day. He would put the crown on the king's head. "Are you ready, Your Majesty?" the Archbishop asked. King Charles nodded. He was as ready as he would ever be. The family began to walk toward the abbey doors. Their steps were slow and matched each other. They had practiced this walk. Inside the abbey, everyone stood up. The organ began to play loud music. The sound filled every corner of the big church. The choir began to sing. Their young voices rose to the high ceiling. The royal family walked through the big doors. They stepped onto a red carpet. Flowers were on both sides. The abbey looked magical. Sunlight came through the colored glass windows. It made rainbow patterns on the floor. King Charles felt the history of the place. So many kings and queens had walked this same path. He thought of his mother, Queen Elizabeth I. She had walked here as a young woman. Now he followed in her steps. The royal children looked around with wide eyes. They had never seen the abbey look this way. Princess Charlotte whispered something to her brother. Prince Louis held his father's hand tight. The abbey was full of people. They all turned to watch the royal family. Many famous faces were there. Movie stars sat next to world leaders. Musicians sat near sports stars. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes. The royal family walked slowly down the long aisle. Everyone bowed or curtsied as they passed. The walk seemed to take forever. At the front waited the coronation chair. It was old and made of wood. Kings and queens had sat in it for 700 years. Soon King Charles would sit there too. The family reached the front of the abbey. They took their places. King Charles and Queen Camilla stood before the Archbishop. The rest of the family sat in special chairs nearby. The ceremony was about to begin. The Archbishop of Canterbury looked at King Charles. The old man's face was kind. He had known Charles for many years. Now he would make him king. "We are gathered here today," the Archbishop said in a loud voice, "to crown our new king." Everyone in the abbey was quiet. The only sound was the soft singing of the choir. The royal children sat still in their chairs. They had been told how important quiet was today. King Charles took a step forward. This was the moment he had waited for his whole life. Queen Camilla watched him with proud eyes. She knew how hard he had worked for this day. The Archbishop held up a small glass bottle. It held special oil. The oil would be put on the king's head. This was an old tradition. It showed that God blessed the new king. "Will you serve your people with fairness and kindness?" the Archbishop asked. "I will," King Charles said in a strong voice. Prince William watched his father. Soon the same thing would happen to him. But hopefully not for many years. He wanted his father to have a long time as king. The Archbishop put a small drop of oil on King Charles's head. Then he said some special words. These same words had been said to many kings and queens through history. Next came the most important part. A worker brought forward the crown. It sat on a red pillow. The crown was heavy with gold and jewels. It shined in the light of the abbey. Everyone looked at the crown. It was hundreds of years old. Many famous kings and queens had worn it. Now it would sit on King Charles's head. The archbishop picked up the crown carefully. He held it high so everyone could see. Then slowly he lowered it onto King Charles's head. "God save the king," the archbishop said in a loud voice. "God save the king," everyone in the abbey repeated. The choir began to sing loudly. The organ played. Bells began to ring all over London. Outside, people cheered. Guns fired in salute. The sound was like thunder. King Charles sat on the coronation chair. The crown was on his head. He was now truly the king. Queen Camilla smiled at him. The royal children looked at their grandfather with new eyes. Prince Harry felt proud of his father. Despite their problems, this was still a special day for their family. He clapped with everyone else. The ceremony continued with more old traditions. The king was given a special staff to hold. He was given a round ball called an orb. These things showed his power as king. King Charles held these items with care. He knew their meaning. He had studied for this day all his life. Now he was living it. He was King Charles II of the United Kingdom. After the crowning, King Charles stood up from the coronation chair. The crown felt heavy on his head, but he stood tall. The archbishop bowed to him. Now everyone would bow to Charles. He was their king. Queen Camilla came forward. It was her turn now. She knelt before the archbishop. A smaller crown was placed on her head. She was now officially queen. Charles looked at her with love in his eyes. The royal couple stood side by side. The abbey was filled with music. The choir sang a special song written just for today. The words spoke of hope and peace. They asked for God to help the new king and queen. Prince William came forward. He knelt before his father. This was an old tradition. The son bowed to the father. The future king bowed to the present king. "I will serve you and our people faithfully," Prince William said. King Charles touched his son's shoulder. "I know you will," he said. The royal children watched with big eyes. They had been told what would happen today, but seeing it was different. Prince George knew that someday Prince William would be king, and after him, George himself would wear the crown. The ceremony continued with more traditions. Important people came forward. They gave gifts to the new king and queen. The gifts were not things to keep. They were symbols of their new jobs. Outside the abbey, people still waited. They watched on big screens. They saw their new king and queen inside. They cheered every time they saw them. The police kept everyone safe and happy. Back inside, King Charles and Queen Camilla prepared to leave the abbey. They would walk out as king and queen. The music changed to a happy march. Everyone stood up. The royal family lined up. King Charles and Queen Camilla would walk first. Then Prince William and his family. Then Prince Harry. Other royal family members would follow. The king and queen began to walk down the aisle. Everyone bowed or curtsied as they passed. The crown on the king's head caught the light. It seemed to send out little flashes. The queen's smaller crown was just as beautiful. Prince William and Catherine followed with their children. The children were doing well. They had been perfect during the long ceremony. Prince Louis looked a little tired now, but he still waved to people as he passed. The family reached the big doors of the abbey. Outside, the sun still shined. The crowds waited. The cheers were so loud they could be heard inside. King Charles looked at Queen Camilla. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. They stepped out into the sunshine as king and queen of the United Kingdom. The crowd roared with joy. This was the moment they had all waited for. King Charles and Queen Camilla stood at the top of the abbey steps. The crowd below cheered wildly. The king raised his hand in greeting. The sun made the crown shine on his head. "Long live the king," the people shouted. "Long live the queen." The royal couple began to walk down the steps. Guards in red coats stood on each side. Their job was to keep the king and queen safe. Behind them came the rest of the royal family. A new coach waited at the bottom of the steps. It was even more grand than the one they came in. This coach was used only for the trip back to the palace after the crowning. It was painted gold and had pictures of past kings and queens on the sides. King Charles helped Queen Camilla into the coach. Then he got in himself. The door closed. The coach began to move. The trip back to the palace would be along a different route. This way, more people could see their new king and queen. The other royal family members got into their coaches. Prince William lifted Prince Louis, who was getting tired. The little boy rested his head on his father's shoulder. Princess Charlotte waved to the people as their coach began to move. Prince Harry got into his coach. He looked back at the Abbey one last time. The day had gone well. There had been no family problems. Everyone had done their part perfectly. The coaches moved through new streets. More people waited here. They had been standing for hours. Some had camped overnight. Now they got to see what they had waited for. Inside the royal coach, King Charles and Queen Camilla waved to their people. The windows were large so people could see them well. The king's face showed his feelings. He felt proud, nervous, and happy all at once. "Look at all the people," Queen Camilla said. "They came to see you." "They came to see us," the king corrected her. "We will do this job together." The coach passed through famous parts of London. People threw flowers. Children waved flags. Old people who remembered past kings and queens wiped tears from their eyes. In the air, planes flew overhead. They left trails of red, white, and blue smoke. These were the colors of the British flag. The planes flew in a special pattern to honor the new king. The coaches passed through a wide street. Tall buildings stood on both sides. From the windows and roofs, more people watched and cheered. Some tossed paper that fell like snow over the procession. The royal coach turned into the mall. This was the wide road that led to Buckingham Palace. Here the crowds were biggest. People packed every inch of space. The noise was like a storm. At the end of the mall stood Buckingham Palace. Its many windows reflected the sunlight. The royal flag flew on top. It showed that the king was coming home. Not as a prince this time, but as King Charles II. The royal coach pulled up to Buckingham Palace. Guards opened the gates. The coach went through and into the palace grounds. Here it was quiet after the noise of the crowds. The coach stopped at the palace door. Footmen in red coats rushed to open the door. King Charles stepped out first. Then he helped Queen Camilla down. They stood for a moment looking at the palace. It looked different to them now. This was their home as king and queen. Inside, the palace staff waited in two lines. They bowed and curtsied as the royal couple walked in. The king and queen nodded to each person. They knew many of them well. Prince William and his family arrived next. The children looked tired now. It had been a long day for them. Prince Louis yawned. Princess Charlotte's perfect hair was a little messy now. Prince George still stood tall, even though he was tired too. "You all did so well," Catherine told her children. "I am very proud of you." Prince Harry came in last. He stood a little apart from the others. But King Charles went to him and put a hand on his shoulder. They spoke quietly for a moment. Some problems could be fixed, even if just for a day. The royal family went to a special room. Here photographers waited. They would take the official pictures of the day. These pictures would be in history books forever. King Charles sat in a big chair. The crown was still on his head. Queen Camilla sat next to him. The rest of the family stood around them. The children were told where to stand. The photographers took many pictures. After the pictures, the crown was carefully taken off the king's head. A worker carried it away on a red pillow. The crown would be kept safe in the Tower of London. It would only come out for special events. The family went to change clothes. The heavy formal outfits came off. More comfortable clothes went on. But there was still more to do today. In another part of the palace, workers prepared for a big party. Important guests would come for dinner. There would be speeches and toasts. The celebration would go late into the night. King Charles went to a quiet room. He needed a few minutes alone. He sat in a chair and closed his eyes. He thought about his mother. Queen Elizabeth II had worn the crown for 70 years. Now it was his turn. He hoped he could make her proud. There was a knock at the door. It was time for the next part of the day. King Charles stood up. He straightened his jacket. The crown was gone, but he was still the king. He would always be the king now. He opened the door and stepped out to meet his guests. The state dinner at Buckingham Palace was the final event of Coronation Day. The grand ballroom was filled with round tables. Each table had gold plates and fine crystal glasses. Fresh flowers from the palace gardens made the room smell sweet. King Charles and Queen Camilla sat at the main table. Important leaders from around the world sat with them. They talked about many things. The new king showed he knew about world problems. He had traveled to many countries before becoming king. Prince William and Catherine sat at another table. They spoke with kings and queens from other countries. Many of these royals were their friends. They had met at other royal events over the years. Prince Harry sat with some family members. He seemed more relaxed now. The hard part of the day was over. Now it was time to enjoy the celebration. The royal children did not come to the dinner. They were too young for such a late event. They stayed in their rooms with nannies. The nannies would tell them stories about other coronation days in history. The palace chefs had made the finest meal. There were many courses. Each dish was small but perfect. The king ate little. He was too excited to be hungry, but he praised the chefs for their work. Music played softly. A small orchestra sat in the corner of the room. They played beautiful classical music. Later there would be dancing. But first there were speeches. The Prime Minister stood up. He raised his glass. "To His Majesty King Charles II," he said, "may his reign be long and peaceful." Everyone stood up. They raised their glasses. "The king," they all said together. They drank to his health and happiness. King Charles stood up to speak. The room became very quiet. Everyone wanted to hear the new king's first speech. "Thank you all for being here today," he began. "This day has been in my thoughts for many years. Now that it is here, I find myself thinking of those who came before me." He spoke of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. He spoke of his father, Prince Philip. He spoke of his hopes for the future. He talked about the things he wanted to do as king. He wanted to help the poor. He wanted to protect nature. He wanted peace in the world. "I cannot do these things alone," he said. "I will need all of you. Together we can make a better world for our children and grandchildren." When he finished speaking, everyone clapped. Some people had tears in their eyes. The new king had spoken well. He had shown he was ready for his new job. After dinner, the dancing began. King Charles danced first with Queen Camilla. They moved slowly around the floor. Other couples joined them. The ballroom was filled with moving couples. Late in the night, King Charles and Queen Camilla said goodnight to their guests. They went to their rooms. It had been the longest day of their lives, but also one of the best. The king stood at his window. He looked out at London. The city lights shined in the dark. Somewhere out there, people were still celebrating. Their new king had been crowned. A new time had begun. King Charles turned from the window. Tomorrow would be his first full day as king. There would be much to do, but for now he could rest. The crown was in the Tower of London, but the job of being king would always be with him now.